Hello again, students. This is lesson 2.9, and this is due on Tuesday, the 9th of June. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, 2.9 starts on page 150 in the book if you're following along. This message is on percents. Let's go ahead and learn what that means. Percents are ratios that always compare numbers to 100. They're generally thought, oops, I forgot to put the T. They're generally thought of as parts of one thing. You can take a look at the hint here. The suffix cent, or the root cent rather, means hundredth, like in century or dollars and cents. Okay. Example, if you got 100% on a test, that means you got all parts of it correct. So generally, we said that percent means parts of 100. So kind of what a percent does is it takes a number and it breaks it into 100 parts. Okay? So if that number is 7, then it's like 7 broken into 100 parts. You're going to have a lot of little fractional pieces if you do that, but each of the parts are always equal to each other. Sometimes you have percents that are over 100%. Like if you say in a business that you earn 300% more money than previous. Now, whatever your previous amount of money is last year that you made, then you earned 3 times that. And just to use round numbers, let's say you earned $100,000 in your business last year, and that means that you would earn $300,000 on your business this year. So you always have to have a number that's considered the base or the starting number of a percent. Okay. And whatever that number is, you should break it into 100 different parts. Okay. Now, let's look at some comparisons just so you can get an idea of how percents work. I wrote down 4 different numbers, and all of them represent the same amount. The fraction 3/4, the decimal 75 hundredths, the ratio 75 to 100, and the percent 75%. Now, the fraction 3/4 can be increased to 75 over 100. Just multiply each part by 25 and you get the equivalent fraction, 75 over 100. The decimal, 75 hundredths, means 75 with the last digit ending up in the hundredths spot. Okay? The ratio 75 to 100 means you have 100 things in your, and 70, well, rather you have 75 things, but 100 of them exist. Okay? Or you're comparing 75 to 100, very similar to how it is written in fraction form. And a percent automatically compares things to 100 or 100 parts. So 75%, 70 means 75 out of 100 parts. Okay. Now, because percents, we always know that they represent parts of 100, then it is not written as a fraction or as a decimal with a decimal point. It's written as a whole percent, or it's written like a whole number with a percent sign. The percent sign tells you that the number is a part, but it is written as a whole number. So why do we use percents? It's easy. I mean, that's actually why we use percents. Not that the answer is easy. The fact is, the number 100 is an easy number to understand, so therefore we use percents because in comparisons, they're very easy to understand. So that's why if you take like a quiz and there's 5 questions on the quiz and you miss one, rather than the teacher writing 4 out of 5, he or she might write 80%. Okay, meaning that for grade purposes, that the quiz was broken into 100 parts, and when you missed one question, that means 20 of those parts were missed. So that means 80 parts, or 80 out of 100, 80% of the test was left. Okay, so that's kind of how percents work. You can pause if you need to review the notes, but otherwise I'm going to go on to solving percents with a proportion. Okay, so I've set up some problems here. on how to solve percents with proportions. Doing this slowly just so that I make sure everything that I want you to see is on the screen. Oops, I think I went too far. Okay, so solving percents with proportions. The percent proportion is known as this. A is to B as, or equals, P is to 100. So this proportion here is actually a formula that you can use. Please memorize it. A is to B as P is to 100. Now I want to tell you what each of these are. A is the part, meaning the part of a number. B is the whole, meaning the number that we're breaking into 100 pieces. P represents percent, or part of, and then 100 is obviously meaning 100 parts. So again, it is part whole, but they're separated in the sense that the letter P represents percent, which means part of 100. Doesn't mean part of any number, it means part of 100. A can be part of any number. B is the number that A is a part of. P can only be part of 100, and 100, of course, is just the number that we use for percent, so it's automatically going to be 100 in this formula. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some problems. What percent of 50 is 25? So we start with the percent proportion. A is to B as P is to 100. Now I have two numbers here, a larger number and a smaller number. And it's asking what percent 25 is of 50. What percent of 50 is 25? Again, be careful. The order that these math sentences are written in can be a little confusing. So you might want to read it a couple times, even 3 times or more, if you need to, just to make sure that you understand what's happening. So remember, percent means part, and it's saying what part of 50 is 25. Okay, so 25 is the number that's going to represent the part. Now let's look back at our little diagram here. The part is the letter A. So therefore, to solve this problem, I would put 25 as my value for A. So what percent of 50, or what part of 50? Well, obviously then 50 has to be B, because B is the whole, or the number that we are finding a percent of. So now I have a proportion. Now with a proportion, the simplest way to solve them in every case is cross multiply. There are a couple of shortcuts if the numbers are super easy, but I don't want to go into that just to avoid confusion. So let's do this. 25 times 100 is 2,500. 50 times P is 50P. Okay, so now to solve, let me just rewrite this again, just because I ran out of room at the bottom there. 2,500 is equal to 50P. Isolate, opposite operation. 50 divided by 50 is 1. 1 times P is P. To both sides. Okay. So the percent is 50. So 25 is 50% of 50. Okay. Now let's do this with some numbers that are not so easy to work out. What percent of 56 is 42? Now the percent of a number means the part of a number. Okay, so the number that is representing the part is 42. The number that's representing the whole is 56. Remember, use this chart, it kind of helps you. A is part, B is whole. Okay, now we cross multiply again. 100 times 42 is 4,200. Multiplying by 100 is like kind of easy if you practice. 56 times p is 56p. And we divide both numbers by 56. And just to save my brain, I'm going to use the calculator. 4,200 divided by 56 is equal to 75. So my answer here, P is equal to 75. So 42 is 75% of 56. Okay? Now, in both cases, we were given the value of A, we were given the value of B, P, the percent was missing, and 100 is given because it's part of the formula. What if something else is missing? Okay? So what number is 50% of 50? Okay? Now in this question, it's saying what number is 50% of another number. So in that case, the percent is actually already given. So I'm going to go ahead and write 50 in here, representing the 50%. And then remember, the number that we're doing this of is always the whole number. So in this case, I have A over B, B being 50, in this case it's B, is equal to 50 over 100, or 50%. See, the percent sign in the question tells me that I already have the answer to P. So in this case, A is missing. So 50 times 50 is 2,500. 2,500 and then 100A. So I'll just write this out here. I didn't leave myself a lot of room, did I? 100A is equal to 2,500. I divide both sides by 100. I end up with A equals now I can cancel the zeros and then I get A equals 25. Well, yes, isn't that what we had in the original problem over here? A equals 25. Okay. Now, I did a C problem here. I think I had skipped it, but 25 is 50% of what number? Okay. And in this case, B is missing. So I put in the other numbers and I can cross multiply again. 25 times 100 is 2,500. B times 50 is 50B. Okay. Divide both sides by 50. And then I get B equals 50. Okay. So I'm just showing you that it's really good to know the proportion A is to B as P is to 100. Know the proportion well so that you can, when you're given a question, you can kind of find the parts and put them in the right spots. 99% of the people that mess up on these problems mess up because they have difficulty figuring out which part to put the numbers into the proportion. Now, there is also the percent equation. The percent equation is A is equal to P percent times B. Now, this is solving it the same way, it's just doing it without a proportion. So here's a question for you. What percent of 40 is 6? Okay. Now, going back to the proportion, I want to remind you, A is the part and B is the whole. So the same thing is true here. What percent of 40 is 6? So which number is the part and which one's the whole? 40 or 6? You're right, 6 is the part. Now I want to just be careful because you can have percents over 100%. Someone might put a really tricky question in there that might say something like what percent of 40 is 200? Okay, and if you just look and say, well, 200 is the big number, so that's the whole, and 40 is the small number, so that's the part, and then put them in that way, you're going to get it wrong. So look at what it's asking. What percent of also means what part of. So what part of 40 is 6? Okay, so saying that 6 is part of 40, but it's asking it in a percentage. So basically what it's saying is if 40 was broken into 100 parts, how many of those parts would be 6? Not 6 parts, but if you were to take the number 6 and break it into the equal number of parts, then how many of those parts would represent the number 6 if 40 was broken into 100 parts? Just forget all of that. That's a little confusing. Bottom line, we know that A is the part, and in this question, 6 is the part, is equal to P% times B, and B is the whole. So 6 is equal to P% of 40. Now, in this case, our variable is P%. Okay? Now, in order to find this, we have to isolate the variable, IOP. Isolate P% by opposite operation, and that's been multiplied by 40. So to unmultiply by 40, I divide by 40 to both sides. So I have 6 divided by 40. Okay. Now I have a problem here. I have this this sort of funny little, 6 is small and 40 is big. I don't like to divide that way. So this might be time you can use your calculator. It won't hurt to do it the long way, but again, I'm teaching algebra. I'm not so focused on teaching arithmetic. So let's just kind of follow through. 6 divided by 40 equals 0.15. Okay, so the answer then is 0.15 is equal to P%. So P% is equal to 0.15. I'll go ahead and I'll move my calculator out of the way. So I want to get P by itself, but I have a decimal here. Well, a quick reminder from the beginning of the lesson, I'll just show you, is that decimals and percents are very similar. See, I have 0.75 also means the same thing as 75%. So in order to change a percent to a decimal, all you have to do is drop the decimal point and write it as a percent. So the answer is P is equal to 15%. Okay? Or in a sense, you can think of moving the percent sign to this side and then dropping the decimal point. To do it manually, the idea is whatever number you have as a decimal, move your decimal 2 places over until there's no decimal in most cases, and then you just rewrite it as a percent. I just picked 71 just randomly, okay? All right, hope that helps. If there's any questions, please feel free to text, call, or email.